I'm here this afternoon having a chat with Ryan Claytor, collaborator and designer of some of the great Mr. Jones watches, Ricochet in particular. The reason we're speaking this afternoon is that Ryan has a new book project that I really wanted to hear about from him. And by the time this comes out, I believe the book should be available. But actually, as
Yes.
we're recording, I haven't physically put my hands on one yet, so I'm itching to. But yeah, Ryan, maybe if you just kick off by telling us a little bit about that project.
Yeah. Well, first of all, thank you so much to you and Stanley for having me on the show today. I really appreciate being here, and I've loved working with you and collaborating on these watch designs, which, by the way, are going to be featured in this book. So perhaps I should talk about what this book is. I'm coming out with an oversized hardcover art book featuring 20 years of my work in comics, illustration, and design. And I am very excited about this book for a couple main reasons. There's a lot to talk about, but I'll try to give you the two-pronged approach. First of all is the content, and secondly is the format. So speaking of the content, I've purchased and read and looked through a lot of art books in my time, and a lot of them I find are just sort of like pretty picture after pretty picture. And after getting through an experience like that, I'm impressed, but I'm also left feeling a little empty. Like, I want to know more about them. Like, when was this made? Who was it made for? How was it made? And those are some of the questions I want to answer with my book, because each piece that I'm showing in here has a heavy emphasis on behind the scenes images showing the process that it took to make these pieces. So there's sort of
Cool.
this
Can I
over.
just want to stop you in question. Like, I'm guessing you're a real archivist. Like, you record your stuff. Like, you've got a kind of archive to draw on. Because I was thinking just as you were talking, that sounds awesome. Like, I'd love to do that for us. But then I think so much of that stuff is just gone. Like, it dissipates. Maybe it's on a hard drive, but it would take me forever to try and track it down. But are you quite diligent on that stuff?
I'm much more so in my more recent years than I was in the past. So it's been a real treasure hunt trying to find those archival bits for this book. And a lot of pieces that I wanted to feature, I'm not, because there's not that archive of process available for it, and I really want to focus on process for this book. So that's a great question. But as of the past 5 years or so, as I've really been putting this book together, I've started devising systems so that it's easier for me to have these things instead of searching in drawers and boxes and bins. I now keep every single one of my um, thumbnail illustrations, my tiny sketches to begin a project, in a book like this, just a real simple sketchbook. And everything I need is in here if I ever want to do a project like this again in the future. And for the past 5 years, makes it really easy for me. But prior to that,
Do you have like a consistent format? Like, you always use the same format sketchbook, or
yes. And now I have a sketchbook, like I have a number of sketchbooks like this that I use because they're so easy to carry around. They're very portable. They're not precious. I used to get sketchbooks and think, oh, this is beautiful, I want to draw in this. And then it would feel too precious to me and I would end up not drawing in it. And so I finally eventually came to the realization, look, I just need something that's quasi disposable, and that will get me past my hang up of, oh, this beautiful art object of a book, I can't sully it with my drawings. So now I do have a very consistent sketchbook that I work in. So anyway, that's sort of the content side of this book, is the art pieces and the process that goes into each. But then somewhat related is the format of the book. And I don't know if would you mind if I share my screen here and show some
please go
images
ahead.
of it? Okay.
Cool.
So this is the currently running Kickstarter page for the book, which you can see the cover of it is designed to have a dual cloth bound cover. So this is not covered in paper like a traditional paperback. It's actually bound in cloth. And those images are foil stamped. So there's a dual foil stamped image on the front cover as well as the spine and the back cover. It also
Super
has a
nice.
built-in ribbon bookmark, copper gilded page edges, and I haven't even got to the inside yet because there's a lot of specialty formatting in there as well. As I
Is this like a project you had in your mind for a long time? It sounds like you had a lot of those details like pinned down before you started, or am I wrong? Like, was it just when you started putting it together that you came up with all those bits?
it's been a real evolution getting to all of this stuff. I found a printer who has not told me no yet. So I kind of conceived of this project, and then every few weeks or a month or so, I would email them again and say, I have this new idea for what I'd like to include inside the book. Can we do this? And they said, yes, it will cost this much, and allowed me to make the decision rather than saying, no, that's too difficult or we can't do it. Anything I've proposed, they've said yes. So,
I mean, that's
here,
amazing, and like that's someone to be cherished, really. Someone who
oh,
who responds
yes,
like
and
that.
yes, indeed. It's been a wonderful collaboration so far. And on the screen right now, speaking of Mr. Jones watches, here is a
Step right
spread
up.
of Step Right Up. That's right. So you can see the original artwork on the bottom here for every one of the discs. And Crispin, I'm
Mm,
not sure if you remember this or not, but when we produced Step Right Up, it was a 4-print watch: glass, hours, minutes, and dial. But
mhm,
we had talked about the possibility of making it a 5-layered design where the characters and the front counter were separate from the curtains and the teddy bears around here. And so you can
mm,
actually see this 5th layer that was eventually incorporated into the glass print. And you can also see things like my very first iteration moving forward with a design, finalized inks, and even character references. Like I wasn't quite sure how to illustrate a person from the back doing this particular
mm.
pose. And so you can see photographs that I took of myself to
Wow.
help figure that out. But I've been talking about these specialty formatting elements inside the book. And this is a high resolution scan of a piece of original artwork of mine. And if you look closely, you can even see the fidelity of this print. You know, you'll be able to see the
Mm,
pencils behind it, the multiple strokes of ink, and how it was made. But when it is printed into the book, there's going to be some die cut holes in that
wow.
page that reveal the fully scanned, processed, and colored image behind it. So you can look at the before image, the original artwork, or the after image when you turn the page, or you can look at them both at once, before and after, as it lines up with the final printed image behind it.
So
So
cool.
so this is just one of the many specialty formatting elements that I have in the book. Like I said, there's going to be gatefold pages, vellum overlays. Like when I illustrate elements, occasionally there will be physical layers to it. Like when I illustrated a pinball machine, I'm thinking about in particular, and when I draw, I have a hard time wrapping my mind around interlocking objects. Like that just breaks my brain, and a pinball
Mm.
machine is a bunch of that, especially once you get the ramps involved and everything. So the only way I was able to conceive of physically drawing this is to draw the playfield and all those elements, and then illustrate the um, ramps on top of that on a piece of tracing paper. And I'm going to be reproducing that in this book using a sheet of vellum to overlay those elements I had on tracing paper. So it's going to be as close to the real thing as possible in book form.
Super cool. I mean, it sounds incredible. It sounds. I'm really excited to see it. Like, it sounds like, I guess, one of the challenges, and I guess one of the questions I would sort of have for you is like, why are you doing a book? Like, in a way, like the like in a way, we all love books and we love physical objects. I mean, I say you and I, like, because we're engaged in sort of physical world of things. But I'm sure that would be a question on some people's lips. But it sounds like you've really used the opportunity of the book format to yeah, really explore that, and it sounds exciting.
Completely. Yeah. So, believe it or not, I'm very interested in books.
Yeah.
And I think about them a lot. It's what I do. I make comics, I teach comics, and I love the form and format of the book and exploring what all it can do and seeing how far I can push that with each subsequent project. And this particular book is the most complex print publication I have ever designed in my life. But I just had a meeting with my printer the other day where we literally went over every single page of the book, every nook and cranny,
Wow.
every specialty formatting option. And there's a lot. We were on the phone for well over an hour talking about this, and just making sure that we're all on the same page. Hey, this is what we're thinking about, and I'm so excited to move forward with this. And I don't know if I've mentioned this, but people can find this at onebiteatatimebook.com. Onebiteatatimebook.com will take you straight to the Kickstarter page that is currently running right now during the month of November 2023.
Amazing. Do you want to say a little bit about pricing and like international shipping? Because I know that will be a question for, yeah, the folks over here in the UK who would like to get a copy.
Definitely. Yeah. If you don't mind me sharing my screen again, I can show you
Please,
some
go
of
for it.
these reward tiers. So the physical book itself is going to retail at $59.95 US dollars, but I'm actually offering it during the Kickstarter for 17% off the cover price plus free US shipping. As
Mhm.
far as the UK is concerned, there's an additional amount of shipping. I think it was I'm trying to remember off the top of my head, 15 or 20 US dollars.
Mhm.
So even with that, if you factor in the price of uh, actual retail cost, $60 plus another 15 to 20, you're paying about $10 for shipping
I
to,
mean, I know how much stuff costs, and that is really inexpensive. You're not
yeah.
you're not making much money on this. If you've got the printers doing all kinds of complicated, non-standard things, that's really inexpensive. I wouldn't have been surprised at double, if I'm honest. Like,
You are not wrong. And I am trying to make this Kickstarter, this crowdfunding campaign, really enticing for people. If they're on the
mm,
fence, this is not going to be what it costs after these books are made. The price is going to be the retail price
fair.
I mentioned, and the shipping is going to be even more. So, this would be a great opportunity to jump on if you're interested in this physical book. But I've also got another few tiers here that I'm really excited about. I've never made a patch before, and I'm
Awesome.
really excited about this. These just came in. So these are
Wow.
in my hand right now. This is actually my hand and the actual patch. It's got 100% stitching coverage, and it's a commemorative 20-year patch. And there's
Awesome.
also going to be a limited edition raised copper foil print that I'll sign and
Oh,
number along with these. And the next tier up even offers a book club. This is an invitation only book discussion with me where I'll give a presentation about the making of this book, some behind the scenes stuff that's not included in the book, and offer some time for questions and answers at the end that, I don't know if you could tell, but I like talking with people. And so I'm really excited about this tier as well.
I was just chuckling at that. The idea of the book is all behind the scenes stuff, and you're going to do a behind the scenes discussion as well. Awesome.
Right.
It's like,
Very meta, very
yeah,
meta.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean that no, but genuinely that sounds really inexpensive for the. I'm sure the incredible amount of work that's gone into it. Like this real labor of love for you to pull this all together.
Yeah, for sure. It's been about 5 years in the works at this point, and, I originally thought about doing something in 2019 when my buddy and I released Coin Op Carnival. That's an
Mm,
illustrated magazine, talking about electromechanical coin-operated amusement devices. So in layman's terms, that's old pinball and arcade games that we really love, and so we were celebrating that history. The entire thing is illustrated in full color, and we toured that book over the course of 2019, right before the world shut down. And at the end of that year, I realized, oh my gosh, this was my 15th anniversary of making comics, and I didn't do anything about it because we were so busy with that book. So I vowed at that time to figure out a new project that I'd start working toward, and this was it. So this has been about half a decade in the making at this point.
You've kind of touched on like one of the questions that I had, which was what's the origin? Because I mean, I'm not being disparaging about your age, but you're not 25 years old. Like you've made an arbitrary sort of cutoff point and said before this point. I know it's Elephanteer Comics, but is that literally it's the founding of Elephanteer
Yes,
Comics?
that's right. So
Okay.
in 2004, I started making my own comics and releasing them under the self-publishing moniker Elephanteer Comics. And I know that's a funny name. And if people are interested, it's a saying that my dad would tell me and all my brothers and sisters as we were growing up. And he'd say, well, it's like eating an elephant. You just do it one bite at a time, and before you know it, you're done. So, that was a way for me to kind of pay tribute to my dad, but also kind of like keep me grounded when taking on these large projects, just doing it one bite at a time. And so it's also the inspiration for the title of this art book, One Bite at a Time. So anyhow, yes, the arbitrary cutoff was the start of me making comics. But through comics, I've also been able to take those skills of making comics and transfer them into things like neon design and custom illustrations and watch designs and all sorts of different projects that I've had just a ton of fun making. But yeah, I'm so excited to share this work and this process with people.
So what was Elephanteer Comics publication number one? What is the origin? Because I don't know the answer to this.
Yeah, the very first publication, there were actually two books I released at the same time. The first book was the start of my autobiographical comic book series that I called And Then One Day. So that ran for a number of issues, and the other comic that came out at the same time was a 24-hour comic that I did. So in the indie comics world, there's this challenge that was put forth by a comics theoretician. His name is Scott McCloud. And it was originally put forth to his buddy who was notoriously slow in making comics. But when he saw him at conventions, he would whip out sketches like nothing. And he said, I'll bet you could do a comic in a day if you wanted to. And his buddy said, oh, no, that's not possible. And then Scott kept thinking about it and eventually tried one of his own. And now it's ballooned into sort of an international challenge to indie comic artists. So my first 24-hour comic was the second publication I released at the same time in 2004.
And at this point, were you a student or you had graduated or like
I
what
had
age are you?
graduated undergrad at this
Okay.
time, but I had not yet launched into grad school. So I was kind of between those years. I graduated undergrad in 2001 and launched into grad school in 2005. So I had about 4 books under my belt when I hopped into grad school, and I've been continuing to make books during grad school and after, and continue to do so today.
What was your undergraduate degree in?
My undergraduate degree, I got a Bachelor of Arts in Art Studio from the University of California, Santa Barbara.
Okay, what's art studio? I'm not sure we have a comparable thing.
Okay, yeah, Art Studio is essentially art making for fine arts, and you can emphasize in different things, or you can take sort of an overview of many media, anything from painting to ceramics to paper making, book making, multimedia, graphic design. There's all sorts of things you can do with that particular degree. And, I was focused on multimedia and illustration. I was taking a lot of those classes and even some paper making and book arts classes, which, obviously interest me quite a lot.
Was like comics always a focus or like that wasn't something you were considering at that time?
Not at all at that time,
Really?
believe it or not. I did
Oh,
not start making comics until after I was done with undergrad. I was probably early 20s by the time I started getting back into comics. I was very interested in reading comics at a young age, 7, 8, 9, 10, 12, etc. But then once I got to high school, I kind of forgot about comics and started thinking about other things until the tail end of undergrad. my last year there, a buddy of mine said, hey, I want to go to the comic book store. Will you take me? And I had a car my last year. And so I said, yeah, sure. I used to do that. And I took him to the comic book store. And as I was hanging around waiting for him, I started looking for things and found just this world of amazing publications that had come out since I had forgotten about them a decade ago. And it was all over from there. I started reading voraciously, and having just got out of art school, I started thinking about making my own, and then actually making my own and getting an internship at Marvel Comics in New
Oh,
York
wow.
City, and then eventually publishing some of my work in 2004.
It's interesting. Like I guess like you, I was very fascinated with comics at yeah, probably that same age up till yeah, sort of 13, 14 maybe. And then kind of didn't go back to them. I guess I never had the buddy take to the comic book store, or my life might have taken a different path. But I guess what's interesting, like I mean, I really don't know that world at all, but the things I've observed from outside is that there's very strong sort of DIY ethos, which really resonates with me. Like it's something I feel is really important for creative people to not like you do. You're a really great example. You don't wait around for someone to come to you and say, "I'm a publishing house, Ryan. I would like to make a book." You say, "No, I want to do this. This is an amazing project. I'm going to make it as great as I can." I think that's really inspiring, and that's kind of what I've observed from World of Comics. Like I say, I'm absolutely not knowledgeable in that area at all. But is that fair? Is that accurate? It's,
I think there's a couple camps in comics, and one is, at least in America, the mainstream big two superhero, Marvel and DC. That's sort of like an assembly line process for making those comics. You have one person who writes the story, and another person who pencils, and then an inker, a letterer, colorist. So you're moving this project on down the line from one person to the next in order to produce a 24-page comic once a month, because that's a tall task. So you need a bunch of people to do that if you're releasing on that tight a schedule. But then on the other hand, you have like an indie comics community who, as you said, does have that very DIY ethos. And when I first started self-publishing my comics, honestly, it was because I did not think that my work was good enough for a publisher to be interested in it. So that's why I first started self-publishing. But now, 20 years later, I would not self-publish, or I would not go with a traditional publisher if you paid me. I am
mm,
so thankful that I have been self-publishing for so long. And this is an entire other podcast that you and I could get into, because I have very strong feelings about publishing, traditional publishing versus self-publishing, and the potential rewards from doing so and the potential detriment from going with traditional publishing. I teach comics at a university, and I mention that to say that I also direct an event on campus where I've been able to invite many heavy hitting cartoonists. Lots of my heroes have come to campus, and I've been able to sit down and have dinner with them and really pick their brain. And I've been surprised over the years. It doesn't surprise me any longer, but I've been surprised over the years at the number of cartoonists, from incoming cartoonists up to upper echelon folks, who have just been taken advantage of by traditional publishing. And as a self-publisher, I'm able to own and control my own work, and know exactly what's going to happen. And I don't have a gatekeeper either. As you said,
mm,
like, I sent you my book, A Hunter's Tale, which was originally a poem by my grandfather, and I turned that into comic book form. But imagine for just a moment if I came to you and you're a publisher and I said, please, Crispin, will you please publish this poem that my grandfather wrote 40 years ago? You're going to be like, forget it. And oh, yeah, by the way, I also want to make it in this unpublishably tiny size. So it's like a poetry chapbook, and it must be on uncoated paper stock, and this, that, and the other thing. I'd be laughed out of the room. And on the rare chance that a publisher would actually be interested in this and say, yes, let's make this happen, I would not see nearly the return, if anything, from that
mm,
book. But take a look at that Kickstarter campaign. It's all public knowledge. It five-figure funded for this tiny little book of my grandfather's poem. That would never happen
mm.
in traditional publishing for me. So that's just one of many stories I could tell about why I am such a vehement self-publisher for life.
Is that hard with the students? Like, what if you have students who are really like they want the Marvel production line model, like that's their focus? Is that difficult then for you to kind of like not to try and steer them off that path?
So I try to teach to any comics interest in my class. In my lectures, I bring in examples from Marvel, DC superhero stuff, and American alternative, and European comics, and bande dessinée, and manga, and anything I can get my hands on that will demonstrate what I'm talking about, so that nobody feels left out. And if they have interest in pursuing, superhero, Marvel, DC type of interests, I try to help them with the medium of comics, and they can do with that whatever they want. But I also try to talk to them about the pros and cons of each side. And it's not that traditional publishing is completely devoid of positive elements, because some artists just don't have an interest whatsoever in understanding business. And
Mm,
I say business softly, because it's a very small thing to do, to call up a printer and say, "Hey, I have a 24-page book. Is there any chance you could print this for me?" That's pretty easy, and it's a very small thing to do to organize a kit. Well, it takes a while to organize a Kickstarter campaign, but it's something that's doable. And so, for the return that you get, I think it's well worth it. Uh, I personally think that traditional publishers take way too much of a cut in order to do the work that they do. The comic artist takes 6 months, a year, multiple years to make a project, and essentially the publisher is pressing a go button on a print machine, taking how much? Yeah, it's not something that I'm interested in.
no, I'm sure. I mean, that sounds awful. Like, it sounds almost, it sounds almost like the kind of I guess the sort of traditional model in pop music, where it's super exploitative of the talented individual who's just used up by the system, as cynically as they possibly can. But I guess I'm surprised. I would have thought that publishers had to adapt to a new landscape, because surely the traditional publishing model falls apart if everyone has access to Kickstarter and has access to different funding models, different ways of realizing their work.
It's
But is that not the case? It doesn't sound like it from
the
what you're
publishing
saying.
lands the publishing landscape is definitely changing, and Kickstarter and crowdfunding are having a big impact on that. And you're even seeing larger publishers come to crowdfunding to kickstart larger projects, like a lot of archival projects or big hardback books. So the publishing landscape is not only changing, but kind of like muddying as well. Like,
Mm,
publishers are coming toward this crowdfunding thing, whereas indie creators are being bolstered by this crowdfunding thing. It's really a really interesting time to be involved. But yeah, you're right that there's some uh, dubious practices that happen, and if you're in charge of your own work, then you're going to treat yourself the best out of anyone.
no, amen to that. And I think also you're a really good example of someone who has a very clear vision. I would like to believe that that's something we kind of overlap on. Like, I feel like that's one of our strengths as a company, that we have very clear vision. And I guess I always used to sort of tell an anecdote when I was speaking to people, that the first series of watches I did, like one of them said, "Remember, you will die," like the Acura, which we still make now. But I would say to people, I would wait like 1,000 years before Swatch or a company like that came to me, and then what's more, like came to me, but then accepted me saying, "What I want to do is put 'Remember, you will die' on the hands of a watch," because I think that's really like cool, bizarre pun and like play on expectations and stuff. And so, really, my only route was to just self-publish, but in the world of watches, I guess we're lucky, because if we had been born 20 years earlier, I think it would have been more or less impossible, because I think those sort of networks just didn't exist. And, just the access to the communications, like being able to communicate with factories or printers or whatever, maybe you would have been lucky. Like maybe you would have been in a town that had a really sympathetic printer and you could have developed that relationship. But equally you might just be not. You might just be in the middle of nowhere with no access.
It's so true. I mean, thinking back 20 years ago to when I first started publishing my own work, I was physically walking my books around to comic book stores and saying, "Would you like to carry these on consignment?" in hopes that one day I would get paid, right? But I have students who I will coach through crowdfunding campaigns, and they've seen over 1,000, over $2,500 for their first comic book. If
Wow.
you told me I could make $2,500 off of my first comic book, I would have thought you were nuts. Like, that just doesn't
Mm.
compute, and it's a reality today, unbelievably. So you're
Isn't it
right.
amazing? But it must be so like, is there not so much noise there? Or there's a sufficiently large community of interested like purchasers. Like I guess that's the thing. You need the community of people who are going to buy into unreleased stuff by unpublished artists, which is yeah, quite a
It's true, and actually, there's a surprising community of readers and creators on Kickstarter who are supporting one another. So, if you look around at statistics on Kickstarter, you'll see somebody who has created 2, 3 projects, but they've backed 75 or 80 or 100 projects. So, they're not just coming there for a quick cash grab. It's really a community of folks who are coming together and making this happen and, boosting each other up. It's a such an exciting place to be right now.
it sounds nice. It sounds really supportive. Like
Mhm.
I guess like I would say that's one area where we kind of diverge. Like I wish there was this kind of network of funny little independent watch brands making crate, but I mean there isn't. Like I know a few people in the watch industry, but it's so conservative. Like it's really dominated by the equivalent of the big publishers, like the mainstream brands, and yeah, there isn't really that community around. Maybe in another 20 years.
Yeah, it's true. Even the micro brands are making, by and
Quite
large,
conservative.
homages. Yeah, yeah, of
Yeah.
things that feel like they've been around before. Every once in a while, you get something a little different, but by and large, it seems like, oh yeah, this looks like a diver. This looks like, who knows what else. Anyway, I completely understand.
But it baffles me because I think if you mapped that to the world of comics and you just had a bunch of people making kind of generic Superman type, like people just be like,
That'd
"You're
be so
mad!" Like
boring.
exactly, but literally, but that's what happens in the world of watches. Like, let's make something that looks like a really iconic mid 20th century watch from Rolex. Brilliant. Like 90% of watch brands probably fall under that umbrella and they're happy with it. Yeah, it baffles me, honestly. I don't understand it.
I wonder if it has something to do with the price of entry, because in order to
Maybe.
make a comic book, a 24-page floppy, you can be into it for, under $1,000 if you want. There's no chance you're going to prototype a watch for under $1,000. So you really have to have that audience built up. And that's something that Mr. Jones Watches has done really well over the years, is that slow grow of your audience. And I've seen your watches sell out faster and faster each time. And
Mm.
you've built up that audience. Your limited edition runs are growing. They're no longer 100, they're now a couple hundred, so that people have a chance to get them because that audience is there. And that's what you have to do with comic publishing and book publishing too, is to build that audience slowly. And so
Mm.
after 20 years, I'm crossing my fingers that at the end of this month we're going to have enough money to print this big crazy book that has only existed in my dreams before now, but I think we've got a pretty great chance of bringing this to fruition.
I think 100%. Like, I mean, for sure, like, I'm going to back it because I just
Mm.
want to see it. I want to hold it in my hands and, we will share it with our
Me
network.
too.
And I hope, I hope as many people from, I hope there is the good overlap between our network and yours and that, yeah, our audience can help support you and in this endeavor because I think it's amazing. I think it's really inspirational project. Like, I really, yeah, I feel inspired.
Well, thank you. That means a lot because you and your company have definitely inspired me. And just to make one more shout out to the Mr. Jones watch community, not only will my published watches be in this book, but I've proposed some designs to Crispin and crew
Okay.
that have not seen a production model, and those are going to be included too. So you'll see some rejected designs that I'm still really proud of, but just didn't quite fit the mold. So there's a lot in here to be excited about, I think.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Ryan, for taking the time to share the project with us. And we'll put links alongside the video, and we'll share on social media. And yeah, honestly, I wish you the best of luck with the project. And yeah, I hope it's really successful.
Thank you so much. If anybody's interested, you can go to onebiteatatimebook.com. That'll take you straight to the crowdfunding campaign, onebiteatatimebook.com. Crispin, thank you so much for the opportunity to chat here today. It's always great to see you.
And likewise, Ryan, thank you.